Good morning, everyone. It's day 3 of Sustainability Week, and for Economics Unscripted today, we're joined by Stephanie Anderson, who is a lecturer in marketing
Yes.
at the Adam Smith Business School. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Amazing. So today's episode, until now, we've been speaking about the big idea of the ecological business school, and then we've been talking about questions and all of that. But for today's episode, we really want to break it down into something more tangible. And one thing that we always see everywhere and do nothing about is waste. So that's sort of why this episode's called Let's Talk Trash.
Excellent name. Excellent name.
So with waste, before I go into all of that, Stephanie Anderson has a personal passion for Benchat. But beyond Benchat, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Stephanie Anderson. I'm a senior lecturer in marketing at the business school, and I'm also the academic lead for responsible sustainable management, which is why I care about sustainability from a school point of view. But I do have a personal passion for bin chat, embarrassingly enough. So I used to live at the top floor of a flat, so my friends always used to say to me that I wasn't taking my bins out enough. And for because it was an absolute hassle to take them out. So we started a WhatsApp chat called Bin Chat, and it kind of grew arms and legs, and it was just completely ridiculous. But I think bins is something that are surprisingly passionate for a lot of people, mainly because it is quite difficult to know what to recycle, what not to recycle. I know that's something we struggle on campus with a lot, particularly around like vegware. If you put it into the wrong bin, then it contaminates the bin, and there's all these sort of misunderstandings that we have around it. So surprisingly, sometimes people are passionate about bins, even though they are often the thing in the background of our lives. Even I have a friend and a colleague who she's in a shared accommodation situation. She's in a flat, and her neighbours were using her bin when it was her own personal bin. So she actually put a lock on her bin. So we can think about the ideas of our ownership of the possessions that we have, and when we waste them, how we want to keep sort of personal ownership of that. So it is a topic that not a lot of people think about, but something that I think is quite funny.
I think it's really funny too because it really quickly escalated from you living in your top flat to ownership and all of
Well, yeah,
that.
absolutely. Because when you have your possessions in your private space, they're private to you and they're personal. But then when you put them out into public space, into a bin, if you think about your personal information, if you have, for example, like medication or banking details, it then becomes a public good when you sort of give up ownership of that. So I'm interested in consumption, consumer research. So for me, I always think about these kind of issues, but I think it is something that we often, when we're throwing away our items, whether it be our clothing or personal information, it is something we consider when we're wasting them.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid sort of stance on it. But beyond the fact that trash is everywhere,
Mm.
why do you think it is actually so important to talk about trash and consumption habits? Like, because it's there everywhere, we see it everywhere, but
Yeah.
no one actually stops and
Mhm.
does anything about it.
Mhm. There's a couple of things. It is important to talk about it because everything that we buy, unless it's something that's an intangible good, will have to be wasted one day and put into disposal. So if we think about that consumption cycle of buying a good, using it, and then often disposing of it, it's that disposal stage that we don't like to think about. So when you put it in the bin, the item just goes and it leaves your house and someone else looks after it. It's not your responsibility anymore. But through a process of increasing awareness about sustainability and the government also bringing in recycling into our homes, we became a lot more aware of how much we were wasting and how much we can recycle. So for me, it made it a lot more pervasive and kind of a lot more obvious to what we use and how much of it can be recycled or reused. So that's the other thing that's changed over the past 20 plus years is that we're seeing a lot more of reuse. So not just recycling into another item or another material, but actually that things can be reused. Like our furniture can be reused. If we think about the eco hub at the university, a lot of people can donate items that they no longer want, and then other students, other staff can potentially use it, and it means it has a different life beyond just using it yourself.
Certainly, and I think in a nice way that also means that sustainability is sort of in your fingertips, and
Mhm.
that's something you can actually you can do something about. And that leads me on to my next question around
Yeah.
anti-consumption. It's sort of going around quite a lot right now, but there's a lot of misunderstanding
Mm.
about what exactly it is.
Mhm.
Could you talk us through
Yeah,
that?
of course. So anti-consumption often sounds very negative because of the word anti, but what it means is it's a means against consumption is how it's defined. So it could be an activity, it could be an attitude or a behavior that is consumers engage with against the act of consuming. So it might be rejecting a brand, not buying a category or a product anymore. It could be not buying a full category of things like no more bottled water. So that would be an example of anti-consuming. It doesn't mean that you are not drinking water at all, but rather you're pushing against the market in terms of buying plastic as much. So it can also be at that more attitudinal level. So feelings towards how we consume. It might be that people downshift their behavior. So, voluntary downshifters are really interesting consumers. They actually earn less money so that they can buy and consume less. So it's a lot more. So you get extreme forms of anti-consumption like that are more on the peripheries of consumption behavior that we see in the marketplace. And then you have more mainstream. So deciding not to buy plastic anymore, having a keep cup. So that could be an example of anti-consumption of plastic again, and reusable items. So it is quite broad as a category, but it is a growing phenomenon. We've also seen movements towards minimalism. So a lot more kind of younger consumers, Gen Z consumers, are interested in a more simplified lifestyle. So less items. This whole notion again of quiet luxury. So
Yeah.
buying well, but buying once. It kind of throws up some issues around the social sustainability of it. So if you're a more affluent consumer, these things are a lot more accessible to you. But for consumers who don't have as much sort of financial resource, it's questionable how accessible some of that consumption is. So it can be virtue signaling as well. We can see consumers using anti-consumption as a way to virtue signal that they're ethical or they're moral. It can also be a more authentic expression of sort of interest that people have. So it's a broad range that we
Yeah.
see proliferate.
I agree with you, and I think it's because it's such a broad range,
Mm.
and different people have different kinds of preferences. There can be sometimes myths going around it, and in a way, they can be polarizing,
Mhm.
and in
Absolutely.
a way, almost distract people from the cause. Um, there are some myths going around about how anti-consumption or extreme forms of
Mhm.
minimalism might actually harm the economy because they're not a business, they're not selling goods
Yeah.
anymore. Like, are we, what is this, like, is
Yeah.
this the opposite of economic growth?
Yes.
What do you think?
So I think times have changed and organizations have to change with that. So yes, traditionally marketers were seemed to be sort of master manipulators. We were getting consumers to buy more, buy constantly. And certainly that's like things like planned obsolescence comes into play. So actually designing products that are planned to time out and to fall apart so that you have to buy it again. That is all true. And we see that consumers are a lot more savvy now, so they're not passive dupes. We used to think of them in marketing many years ago now, but consumers are active, they're agentic, they have choice, they are knowledgeable. And because of that, consumers now know that marketers do all this sort of crafty behavior and push back against it. So it's a little bit of market resistance. So organizations have to meet consumers where they want to consume, but it's also important that they change their business models. And we see that with companies like IKEA did a really great campaign a number of years ago now that they encourage consumers to bring their items in. And then they would be sold as secondhand furniture, which makes it really accessible for consumers on lower incomes, but also it means that the cycle of reuse is happening. It's that circular economy idea. So, yes, you could argue that anti-consumption and getting consumers to buy less is a degrowth strategy, which might make less money for an organization, but it's also an opportunity to sell in a different way and appeal to consumers in a different way, such as IKEA did. there's a risk factor. So
Yeah.
there's organizations that haven't done that so well, and an example would be sadly H&M have been accused of greenwashing. So you can bring in your clothes that are going to then be recycled, but you're given a voucher to then buy more clothes. Okay, because that's the
Yeah.
marketers. We want you to buy again.
No, that's leading me on to my next
Yeah.
question. I'm gonna put you on the spot here a little bit. Does this actually make marketers' job easier or harder?
That's a great question. I think the challenges around sustainability to do it, I'm going to say authentically, but for the right reason,
Mhm.
takes a lot of more careful thinking, which is more skilled marketing. So whether that makes it harder, that's an opportunity, is up for debate. I see it as an opportunity. Um, Certainly, lazy marketing would have it more that we try and just get you to buy more and buy again. And obviously, there will be organizations that do that and will always continue to do that. But I think that organizations that are morally grounded and they know that especially younger consumers care about the morals that underpin organizations, then I think it's important that they address that need and that want, because that's the whole point of marketing, is to sort of improve consumers' lives and provide solutions to problems that they have. So if a problem that they have is there's too much stuff out there and there's too many drivers to constantly consume, then solve that problem for them.
Definitely, and I think the savvier that you guys marketers get, the savvier the young people that
Yeah,
care should also get.
absolutely.
On those lines,
Mm,
what do you think are some sort of suggestions for students like
mm,
ourselves, in terms of, doing our bit towards a sustainable transition,
mhm.
whether it's sort of, buying a Tesco meal deal for
Yeah.
lunch or a pint, and
Mm.
sometimes they only serve in plastic
Yes.
cups.
It's really difficult in terms of food. Food is challenging. We also have a cost of living crisis that's ongoing, which really negatively impacts students who aren't in full time employment, so therefore have less economic resource. So I think being really mindful of doing what you can within your means is important. There's something known as consumer responsibilization. And it's this notion that it's like a top down mechanism through which government or institutions responsibilize individuals to take accountability for things like sustainability or ethics or care, things like working environments and things. And that's a top down mechanism that forces us to care and act responsibly. And it does work. We can see that in a number of countries that ban plastic bags, for example, and it forces consumers to act in a particular way. But for students, I think it's really important to only do what you can within your means. So if you have the capacity to buy something sustainable and more ethical, and it might be more expensive, that's wonderful. But at the same time, social sustainability has to be taken account of. It's not for those who have less means, it's not their responsibility to overstretch themselves and then put themselves into sort of financial detriment. So I think circular systems like Depop or like secondhand markets and things like that are great places that you can be sustainable whilst also still living a life that you can like afford to feed yourself and have a nice and fulfilling time.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us today,
Thank you so much,
Stephanie.
Lavanya. Thank you.